You are in the temple of the rants where I rant about whatever my $15 a month plus patrons want me to rant about. You can get one of these by being one of those. This one's for John, who says, rant about the four main sagas of Dragon Ball Z. Saiyan, Frieza, Cell, and Buu sagas. Talk about the highlights and low points for each one. That's going to be hard to do because I only ever watched Dragon Ball Z on television in the 90s, and I was never an active viewer of it. The only reason that I've seen most, if not all, of DBZ is that it was just on TV all the fucking time after a certain point. And, like, it's funny because the show did not resonate with me at all. As a kid, I was into stuff that sort of reminded me of myself. I wasn't so much into. Like, I think a lot of people who liked DBZ liked it because they looked up to the characters, wanted to be like or look like them, you know, a bunch of big, muscly badasses who were fighting to save the world. I preferred shows about nerdy little fucking glasses wearing kids, you know, like myself. And, you know, and I was also huge into Pokemon and stuff at the time. So, like, DBZ didn't really draw me in. And also the fact that it was this ongoing narrative meant that it was not so easy to just jump in at any point and instantly understand it. I started to take more of an interest when people around me were explaining it to me. When, you know, people would read magazines that talk about what was going on in the show in Japan before, you know, at points further along than where the anime had gotten in America, and would just tell me about it and, like, try to summarize to me what the hell was going on in the show. It made it a little bit easier to follow sometimes, but you know, it just through sheer force of how often it was on, be it at other people's houses or just we had Cartoon Network playing at all times in my house, so I'd catch a lot of it. I basically understand what happened in each arc, but I didn't have that feeling of, like, following it, really knowing, like, what happened in what order, and being able to, you know, feel the emotional highs and lows of the series. So from my memory, like, the Saiyan arc, I've very much seen in jumbled pieces. You know, I don't think I've seen all of it. I know I've seen some parts of Raditz, some parts of Vegeta. I remember Goku turning into a giant monkey. Or maybe it was just Vegeta who turned into a giant monkey. I don't even remember. I don't remember who all turns. I know Gohan becomes a giant monkey at some point in one of these arcs. Gohan's trained by Piccolo. I just remember that first arc feeling like a little bit more, like, dark and serious. Like, I think that early on, at least, with Dragon Ball Z, it was meant to be, like, a little bit of a more gritty version of the story. Because Dragon Ball was such a fun, lighthearted adventure with a kid protagonist, and it's like, oh, well, they're grown-ups now, you know, Goku's gonna die, there's gonna be, like, all this more serious shit going on. And then after that point, I think it kind of gets goofy again as it goes. You know, from the Frieza arc, I remember the Ginyu Force being pretty hilarious and stuff like that. There's, of course, the big Spirit Bomb moment blowing up Namek. Again, those first two arcs I've seen in such random chunks that it never, the individual moments never stuck out to me. Like, the time when I really started paying attention, like, when I started seeing the show more often, was really during the Buu saga. So, like, most of my memory of the show is of the Buu saga, which I know is, like, the least popular one. But, like, I particularly remember having enjoyed the parts when Gohan is a teenager and he's doing the Great Saiyaman thing. Like, because it was more of an episodic slice of life at around that part of the show, it was easier to just catch random episodes and fully understand what was happening. So I think that was probably the part of the show I enjoyed the most when it was actually airing, was just you know, the more relatable slice of lifey bits where it wasn't a gigantic battle that if you missed an episode you weren't quite sure what was going on. And also there was just a lot more characters around that time where, you know, you've got, like, it's almost like the DBZ characters have become like a giant family when you've got the, you know, Vegeta and Bulma are together, and they've got Trunks, you've got the three generations almost of Goku's family. Yeah, like that, not technically three generations, but Goten is so much younger than Gohan that it's like, almost like having three generations. You know, it just felt like it was more of a vibrant cast that was easier for me to be like interested in the lore of just like all these characters being around and stuff like that. Um, I remember the Cell arc. Like I liked the androids, but eventually I kind of lost track of what the hell was going on. I know parts of the story more from the video games. I just remember all I really remember when I think of the Cell arc is Goku going, "Use the pain of loss," like as though the pain of loss was the name of an attack, you know, which is pretty hilarious. But yeah, I mostly remember the Boo Saga. The fusion dance is a highlight for me. Fat Boo just being a fun, cartoony character, hanging out with Hercule, like all that kind of stuff from the early Boo arc is the part that stands out the most in my memory. And then worst parts, I mean, I guess any time there's just a bunch of episodes where nothing really happens. You know, if you're watching an episode where like it's mostly just back and forth punching and nobody dies or anything changes in the battle, it's just fighting kind of absently. Those are definitely the low points. I remember that by the end of the Boo Saga, everyone in the universe basically had died, and they were all going to die again. So it's like, yeah, death mechanics got super weird. But yeah, it's strange for me to look back on DBZ because it's like I know intellectually what happens in each arc. I know from having seen enough episodes and having had people tell me what happens, but because I never watched it in order, it's just like a bunch of impressions of what goes on in each arc. It's not really like I actually watched it. Such a strange feeling to be so familiar with something and yet feel like I have so little to say about it because I wasn't really there. I wasn't really in the thick of it. I just knew about it because it was a cultural phenomenon, and it was unavoidable. I remember when GT came out and not really caring for it that much. Uh, yeah, I can't really add much to it. I'm sorry. I don't know enough about the four major arcs really to say anything definitive. There's your rant.